We have systematically taken humans out of every workflow in a bank. We don't go to branches anymore. We don't even go to ATM machines anymore. And it happened slowly and it happened over decades. And so perhaps people didn't notice. And yet when people work from home and so on, we sometimes wonder whether it's the right thing to do. I myself have doubts in my mind. Is this the right model? But I think, business will evolve exactly like how banking evolved. It's you're going to take humans systematically out of the equation. And so we're going to see a massive productivity multiplier over the next few decades. And this is a great gift for India, because if India can just adopt this technology, we will leapfrog the West. We will do in a fraction of time what they took 50 years to do as part of the industrial revolution, right? Because we'll just adopt all of that at a much lower cost and at a much massive scale. If you have cheap debt and you mix it with equity to buy a productive asset, your return on equity is substantially higher than if you had entirely equity financing. And I would say that you all should look at your careers and your job decisions as investors. I did that myself. I mean, my decision to join Wipro was an investment decision. My decision to join Dr. Reddy's was an investment decision. And even today when people say you've been 18 years an investor, what's your best investment? My best investment is Gaja Capital.
Greetings everyone. In this edition of Exploring Minds, we have with us Mr. Imran Zafar from the founding team at Gaja Capital. He has experience of more than 22 years in pharmaceuticals, in technology services and private equity. He did his masters from BITS-Pilani in computer science and he is an alumnus of IIM Bangalore. Pleasure to have you, sir. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Nice to see you, Shivank.
You studied computer science from BITS in the early 2000 era. How was it, sir? What were they teaching at that time? What were you learning?
So it was a software engineering program by BITS-Pilani. In those days, we didn't have a lot of online resources as you guys do.
Right.
So we had professors flying in from BITS-Pilani to Wipro campus. And for 4 years, we gave up all our weekends to study software engineering. But the focus of that program was more software architecture as opposed to coding. Coding was the day job.
Right.
So we were all software developers working for large clients in the UK and the US, typically the kind of outsourcing work that you do at Wipro. But at the weekends, we had an opportunity to study at a different level of abstraction. So a lot of focus on software architecture, how products should be built. So it was a great perspective to have early on in my career, not just about the engineering problem of software, but about the architectural problem of software. That what you set out to build is almost as important as how you ultimately build it. So that was good grounding.
And you always loved the technical roots, and how did you ventured into the PE world, sir?
So my brush with private equity and venture capital was through my summer internship. So in 2002 at IIM Bangalore, my summer internship was with a venture capital firm called the View Group. And View Group was run by a Boston-based team, and the Indian managing director was Gopal Jain, who's a founder of Gaja Capital. And that was my first brush with venture capital. They had a beautiful office in Kamla Mills. They were one of the rare venture capital firms at that time that ran a model very similar to the incubators that you see now. So they did some very interesting work in the outsourcing, offshoring space at that time. And that was 2002. And I joined Dr. Reddy's after campus, after IIM Bangalore, but stayed in touch with Gopal, and then we all came together in 2005.
But before this, your Dr. Reddy's stint, that was in US?
Yes, so I joined Dr. Reddy's in the CEO's office. So I worked closely with G.V. Prasad, which was great because it gave me a bird's eye view of the pharmaceutical industry. I was a complete novice to the industry. And then I moved to the US office. They had an office, now it's in Princeton, but back then they were in Bridgewater in New Jersey. And I was part of the specialty pharmaceuticals business. So if you're familiar with pharmaceuticals, most Indian pharmaceutical companies offer generics, which are drugs that go off patent, which we then manufacture the same quality, but at a fraction of the cost, and we sell it around the world. And then they are pure innovators that create molecules and discover molecules from scratch.
The APIs and
the complete novel, what we call NCEs or novel compounds. But we were in the middle. We were in bridge innovation. So we would take off-patent drugs, but tweak the dosage or combine them with other drugs to create novel compounds.
New innovation.
In that sense, new innovation, which is on the back of existing off-patent drugs. So this is not completely novel. So that was the business I was part of. Yeah.
And how did you decide to leave the States because at that juncture, I believe the major influx was happening from India to the States, but you decided to come back to India. What made you do so?
So actually, conversations in the US. So this was 2003 to 5. That time frame in the US, and every party I went to, any get together I went to in New York or New Jersey or anywhere, I mean the noise around India was getting louder and louder and louder. And I was often asked, every party I went to, I was almost mobbed by these American students who were curious to know about India, what's happening, what's exciting. And I asked myself, I'm in India and I've got a great network back home. What am I doing in the US? So actually a lot of that credit of heading back, I owe to the folks I met in the US. But also, I think the move back to India was also in many ways the conviction that India will get to the global stage at some point as a major economy. And I must give credit to Gopal and others who had this vision that just like you see in the US, you see large homegrown investment firms like Blackstone and others who've created a lot of wealth. His vision, along with our other co-founder Ranjit Shah, had this vision that the most successful investors in India will be homegrown. People who understand our terrain, people who understand the cultural nuances of entrepreneurship, what motivates people, what gets these teams to innovate, what kind of innovations can you see in India, which will be a very unique model compared to the rest of the world. And so in many ways, for me, it was joining their vision and creating a world-class investment firm right here in India. That was the driving force.
And do you remember your first deal, sir? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so over 18 years, we made many memorable investments. So one of the early investments we made is a company called Career Launcher. And Career Launcher is a household name. Anyone who's preparing for CAT will know Career Launcher. And I'm really fortunate that I serve on the board of the company. It's been one of our oldest investments, and it's done reasonably well. Of course, Test Prep has had its own share of onslaughts of technology, Byju's and others. But it's a profitable, high-growth company, and it's one of those rare companies that I think will survive for the long term and thrive for the long term. So that was an interesting investment, and since then we've done a lot of work in education. So we invested in a company called EuroKids, which we sold to KKR. So now it's called Lighthouse Learning. They're market leaders in pre-K and K-12 education. We invested in a whiskey company called John Distilleries. So if you or anyone else like whiskey, you should try the Paul John. You're a teetotaler. So am I, by the way. But one of my most successful investments was from Alcobev.
Wow.
So that's they've got Big Banyan wines and Paul John single malt, and it's a great example of creating premium high quality products right here in India for the world. So we sell in 90 countries around the world.
Wow.
Then we invested in a company called Educational Initiatives, which I believe has come to Plaksha as well, and I'm very excited that some Plaksha students are going to join them. EI has been in business for 20 years. It's a B2B edtech company. It's high gross margin, high growth, and one of those rare profitable growth stories in edtech. Because in edtech, you see examples of large B2C companies but losing money, or companies that have not been able to scale. And EI is a rare example of a profitable, sustainable, high margin business with technology and pedagogy at its core. So that was another memorable investment. And then more recently, we've invested in companies like Lead Squared and Scienzy. Hopefully some of you, will find your way into these companies if you're interested in working in high growth startups. So yeah, it's been a good fun journey so far.
You're mentioning that you invest basically in the 1 to 10 journey and in businesses.
The 10 to 100.
10 to 100 journey. and the businesses that are scalable. Tell us about the definition of a scalable business. How do you evaluate a business model and figure out ki, okay, yaar, this can be scaled enough, let's invest in this?
So there are a few things to keep in mind. The first is when you look at a business, and I take specific examples. So I'll take Lead Squared, which is right now at nearly $40 million of revenue, or ScienceZ, which is 10 million but doubling every year, or Educational Initiatives, which is now nearly 100 crores in revenue, or EuroKids, which is much larger now, few hundred in EBITDA, in fact. So what about these companies lend themselves to scalability? Right. So the first is that they have a product or service that is much, much better than what's out there. And VCs like to use the term 10x better, but either they have created a model that is 10x better, or they've created a proposition and found a white space in the market. So that's one. Let's call it the offering advantage.
Right.
But the second is that they address a very large market. And by the time we come in, there is clear evidence that this is a very large market. So for example, in EuroKids, the first insight we had when we invested in the company is that we saw preschool education had hit the two-wheeler moment for India. There was a time when Indians, all Indians, owned two-wheelers, right? And it came, like today, the two-wheeler moment of today is the car moment. The car ownership is just going through the roof in this country. So as disposable incomes rise, you'll see certain things take off and become mainstream. But it was not always like that, isn't it? If you go back 20 years ago, car ownership was a niche.
True.
And two-wheeler ownership prior to that was a niche. So a lot of our work is about looking at profitable niches and making a judgment call on what about the demand side, what about the macroeconomic environment and the sectoral environment suggests that now a certain niche is going to go mainstream. And then you really latch onto it. So take SaaS. We believe SaaS in the next decade will be much more than IT services, and it will do it in half the time. So IT services is $200 billion, but it took 30 years. And we believe IT services will create $200 billion in half the time. And on that revenue, they'll get a much higher multiple. So they'll create substantially more value than IT services. But this was not true forever, right? So until 5 years ago, SaaS was a niche phenomenon. But we think now SaaS is mainstream. And so we've invested in Lead Squared and ScienceZ. And we think there'll be, if not hundreds, there'll be many, many SaaS companies from India that will create $1 billion or more of value.
The SaaS businesses are generally, they're scalable, we understand that. But talking about a career launcher investment, did you invest in that when it was a physical classroom model? What was the thinking behind investing a physical classroom model? Because that faces some problems of scalability.
That's right. So we made our share of mistakes as well. Not every investment you make, is scalable to the same extent. But let me share our thinking. So in 2007, when we made our investment in Career Launcher was a market leader in 2 exams, the CAT exam and law. Right. So they were market leaders in both. In CAT, it was a duopoly with time in Career Launcher. And in law, they were number 1 by a huge margin. Now, both of these exams are very niche. Our call was that CAT will explode in India. The number of MBA aspirants will explode in India.
What was the number at that time? Right now, it's approximately 2 lakh, 2.5 lakhs every year.
Shockingly, it hasn't moved. So when we came in 2007, it was a little under 2 lakhs. And our hypothesis was that CAT test takers will go to 5 lakhs. Right? That was our hypothesis. And that hypothesis was that as the economy grows, you'll have more and more MBA aspirants. Those MBA aspirants will write a exam. There'll be India's version of GMAT, and we thought CAT will be India's version of GMAT. That was a simple thesis.
Right.
And we thought 2 will go to 5 and so on. Similarly for law. In reality, what happened is that the IIT phenomenon, the engineering phenomenon, which is NEET and JEE and so on,
that played out
very well, but we didn't have market leadership in those exams. So not only were the numbers much, much higher, the ticket size or the average revenue per user was substantially higher. So the revenue opportunity was much, much higher.
Got it.
So a lot of, by the way, if you look at Akash was a center-based model. So it was not really about technology. It was about being in the right market and being right about what will turn mainstream. Fast forward now 15 years, CAT is still a very valuable business.
Right.
A lot of companies have come and gone. As Career Launcher continues to survive and generate profits. And now they are even stronger in law. But they've learned their lessons from the past and are now gaining on the back of CUET, which is the common entrance exam.
Yeah.
And that is a massive market. And so I suppose the company has learned now, after a long, long period of time, that it is one thing to generate a lot of profit in one sector, but you have to pick a very large TAM and then achieve market leadership, because then the math really works.
Scalable businesses can only happen in large addressable total TAM.
So it's a necessary but not sufficient condition.
Can you give an example?
So for example, you can have a very large market, but you may not have a scalable business model. So you need a combination of two things. You need a very large market and you need a sustainable business model to address that large market. So a lot of consumer tech companies, for example, they might offer something for free as one example to a very large number of people. So the TAM is large. If you do surveys with those consumers, they will agree that there was a pain point and this free service or product addresses it. But if you don't have a sustainable model to monetize, you don't have a business. Right? So you need a sustainable business model married with a very large TAM to make a scalable business.
And you spoke about the investments and the companies. You're talking about the Ziz of founders. Can you tell us what have been your observation about the Ziz of some great founders in, categorizing into 3, 0 to 1, 1 to 10 and 10 to 100 journey?
So I should explain what jizz means.
Sure.
So the term jizz comes from the bird watchers, and bird watchers, when they categorize birds, they call it the jizz of a bird, Jizz, which means you have a unique signature profile of a certain bird, which is the plumage, the habitat, their flight, their behavior, and so on. And all of that put together gives a unique characterization of a bird, which then allows you to spot them in nature, right? That's the jizz of a bird.
Right.
And I use that analogy to say, what's the jizz of a great deal or jizz of a good company or a jizz of a good founder. So in the 0 to 1, 1 to 10 and 10 to 100, and many founders straddle these three events. In the 0 to 1, the founders that are most successful have what VCs call founder market fit, meaning that they are their educational background, their network of family and friends, their experience are relevant to the market that they are trying to disrupt. Right. So if you spend 10 years in a chemical plant and you create innovation that has something to do with automation in a chemical plant, you have founder market fit because you're an insider to that world. Right. In the 1 to 10 journey, the repertoire of skills needed start changing. So it's not the technical knowledge and the understanding of the product and offering that you have, but now your leadership skills, your ability to attract investors and capital, your ability to attract talent, these things become very important. And in the 10 to 100, your ability to manage. So you move from, let's say, the idea man in 0 to 1 to founder from 1 to 10 to leader and manager and CEO in 10 to 100. And these three transitions are very, very difficult and have to manage very, very well.
Wow.
Which is why I keep saying that just like you have the right founder for the right stage in the life cycle of a company, you should also self-select into right kind of investors for the relevant stage of a life cycle of a company. And when this combination works well, which means you have the right investor for the right stage, the right CEO for the right stage, then magic happens.
And talking about the scenario of artificial intelligence, do you find the heat in the private equity space of these trends like AI and stuff?
We are not facing the heat yet, but there's a good chance we're all frogs in boiling water. Because generative AI, by the way, AI is not new, right? We all know, I mean, we used to use different terms before AI, machine learning, before that advanced analytics and so on. So it's not new, it's many decades old. But what has changed now is that the amount of compute power that we're throwing at the problem. And especially with the LLMs now coming up, the kind of productivity gains you're going to see in simple to automate tasks like software development and testing and so on, is going to force everyone to do a first principles relook at their business models. And I wish I had an answer of how it will affect the private equity business, except to say that I can be very confident that it will affect the private equity and venture capital business. I don't think anyone is immune. And in fact, I was sharing with you that I'm reading this book about the peregrine falcon and so on, because I'm literally these days searching for what is human
which can't be
about our
replaced.
world which cannot be automated. And that should reveal to you my own not anxiety, but my own
worry about
thought about AI.
Got
That
it.
there'll be a very there'll be very few spaces left
which will be
for humans, which will be completely untouched by AI.
Can you? So one was observation, and the other one you spoke about was negotiation. What are some other things which will be untouched by AI? You think, because in our conversation, we figured out that you're deeply rooted in future. Tell us about the future. How do you envisage it from a private equity and a business perspective? What do you think the future of businesses and the scalable businesses would be?
So one thing is clear, right? That businesses will increasingly automate away humans from the equation.
Right.
That is pretty clear. And and I was reflecting the other day about remote working and so on. And it's interesting that if you look at how banking has evolved over the last 100 years, we have systematically taken humans out of every workflow in a bank. We don't go to branches anymore. We don't even go to ATM machines anymore. And it happened slowly, and it happened over decades, and so perhaps people didn't notice, right? And yet when people work from home and so on, we sometimes wonder whether it's the right thing to do. I myself have doubts in my mind, is this the right model? But I think business will evolve exactly like how banking evolved. It's you're going to take humans systematically out of the equation. Humans will then elevate focus on what uniquely makes us human. And I think imagination, creativity, empathy, observation, these will remain. Negotiation, conflict resolution, defining the interconnections between humans and other humans, politics, which will remain in fact become even more important, because politics is the glue the glue that brings different special interests together to make things happen. So you will see a lot of these rising in importance. You will see people's own definitions of what is success changing. This has already changed. People already are not satisfied with a 9-to-5 job. They want more from their lives. They want more meaning, more purpose. And at some point, we will get to a point where there is universal basic income. There is no other way to balance this onslaught. But I'm in the optimist camp in general. In general, I feel that technology will reduce the cost and increase access, and it will empower more people to do much more. And so we're going to see a massive productivity multiplier over the next few decades. And this is a great gift for India, because if India can just adopt this technology, we will leapfrog the West. We will do in a fraction of time what they took, I don't know, 50 years to do as part of the industrial revolution, right? Because we'll just, adopt all of that at a much lower cost and at much massive scale. So I'm hopeful.
What are certain industries or that you are bullish on?
So
based on the India story that we all
absolutely
speak about.
So see, we have invested in 5 sectors. So all our work can be explained through the lens of 5 sectoral trends. The first is education. And we believe India is the most attractive private education market in the world. Its attractiveness will only increase. And as the demand for specialized skills increase, and as technology gets more and more prevalent, people will not just work from home, they will work from India. We'll have a massive opportunity for us to up-level and upskill our talent. And this will show up not just in preschool and K-12 and higher education like Plaksha, but even in continuous education. So first of all, education, we are long-term bullish on the education opportunity in India.
Got it.
The second is financial services. India's debt to GDP is still a fraction of the West. It's still a fraction of China. And in a high growth, productive economy, leverage can be a huge multiplier. Debt creates chaos in an unproductive economy. Because as we all know from our personal experience, if you have cheap debt,
right,
and you mix it with equity to buy a productive asset, your return on equity is substantially higher than if you had entirely equity financed it. But what you need to underline is a productive asset. So if we all believe that India is a productive asset, that we are going to invest in productive projects, then more leverage can be a multiplier effect. I'm in that camp where I believe that both individual households, small and medium-sized entrepreneurs, medium-sized companies, large companies, all of them are far more productive than their counterparts around the world, and therefore more leverage is good for us.
True.
The third is consumer. So we spoke about Alcobev, we spoke about e-commerce, we've invested in a company called ExpressBees.
Right.
So we are big believers in the consumer market in India, and a whole variety of different sub-segments of consumer are going to see large valuable brands. We're going to see new models, marketplaces, new ways of reaching and engaging customers. And as India's per capita income rises, as our markets go deeper and deeper into tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities, you'll see a very vibrant, rich and deep consumer market, which will be great for this country, because we are not like China export dependent. We will remain a large consumer market, and the consumer market gives a nice floor to our story. It's a downside protect to our story. And finally, SaaS we spoke about, and healthcare also. By definition, any growing company like this, we are still young, but as our median age progresses, we will be a very large healthcare market. So everything from pharmaceuticals to devices to healthcare services, we see a huge opportunity in it.
And for the students of businesses who want to learn this, what do you think is the right way to learn a business? How they can create opportunity? How can they identify opportunities for themselves, learn new business models, and replicate and go on to create great businesses, which companies like Gaja Capital invest in? What's the right way?
I mean, I think one great opportunity that your generation has is a vibrant startup ecosystem. And I would say that you all should look at your careers and your job decisions as investors. I did that myself. I mean, my decision to join Wipro was an investment decision. My decision to join Dr. Reddy's was an investment decision. And even today, when people say you've been 18 years an investor, what's your best investment? My best investment is Gaja Capital.
Wow.
So you should not be afraid to use the same rigor of due diligence, of appraisal, of evaluation,
when you're seeking a job with someone, you should use the same rigor as if you're putting your own money. And it is true, isn't it? You're putting, in fact, a lot more than your money. You're putting yourself in these companies. And once you approach it with that sense of ownership, you get the same kind of returns from it. It's no longer a 9-to-5 job. You're now a part and parcel of the story, of the narrative, and you really then understand what's going on. So my recommendation to a lot of you here is, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, work in factories, work in real world operational problems, work in smaller companies. Don't be tempted to get a cushy job too soon in your life. Wrestle with real world problems, and one of two things will happen. Either you'll find someone with a vision that you really love and you'll join him or her, which is fantastic, or you'll have a vision of your own. And by the way, nothing wrong with either path, right? As long as you have a fulfilling, purposeful, engaging life.
Thanks a lot for doing this with us, sir. There were a lot of aspects that we could go deeper into, and probably we will go. We have a small gift for you. This was built in our makerspace. The laser printed photo stand for you. So a very lighter version.
Oh, that's so lovely.
So probably we have a stand for this. We can.
Wow,
this will
that's lovely.
remember you
How
about
do I
Plaksha.
show this? There. Thank you.
So thanks a lot.
That's great, and I'll of course this will be pride of place in my office. So thank you so much. This is really nice.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.